Last week, the Lunduke Journal shared the story of a gentleman by the name of Andrew Tomazos. Now, Andrew Tomazos is a software developer that works with the C++ standards group known as WG21, Working Group 21. This is the organization, the ISO organization, that sets the standard for the C++ programming language. And considering how important C++ is to the world, this is a pretty important standards body. Well, Andrew Tomazos was removed from that organization entirely. He was kicked out, given the boot, banned, if you will, because he used the word, and I'm quoting here, question in a technical paper. That really was the reason he was banned, at least as far as we knew. This was crazy. This was wild. Why on earth would a standard organization that runs the technical standard for C++, an organization that assuredly asks a large number of questions all the time, object to someone using the word question in a technical document? This was insane. This was bonkers. So the Lunduke Journal naturally reached out to everyone we could think of, multiple points of contact. We reached out to some individuals within that working group directly. We did everything we could to try and get to the bottom of this, and people went into lockdown. In fact, the ISO standard C++ working group Twitter or X account locked themselves down in response to the show that the Lunduke Journal published. So after the Lunduke Journal published the show about this just last week, boom, they went into lockdown. These posts are protected. Only approved followers can see ISO CPP's posts, it says now. And this was just wild. This was absolutely insane. And it definitely made it harder to get to the bottom of whatever the heck is going on here. Since then, I've been in contact with two individuals from inside the C++ working group who are concerned about what is going on. And we'll have more of that information coming forward in the coming days. But now, luckily, the individual himself, Andrew Tomazos, has published his firsthand account of the incident in question. And I want to walk everyone through exactly what that is. Interestingly, you can go read this over at tomazos.com. Tomazos.com. And he published this as a PDF because I believe he shared this with individuals inside the working committee. And I'm going to read a little bit of it to you now, and I have some additional thoughts I'd like to share. It's just interesting to note what he thinks is happening, and he dispels many of the myths that have come out around this. There's been a great deal of people talking about things like, oh, Andrew Tomazos was really banned from the C++ group because he was committing all sorts of horrible acts, and this was just the last straw, and so they kicked him out. Turns out that's not true. Other people stated that he was kicked out because he basically plagiarized all of his papers using ChatGPT. That also appears to be just a falsely made up thing, substantiated by absolutely no actual inside sources. And the people I've spoken to inside the working group have backed up Andrew Tomazos' account here. So this all appears to be generally quite accurate and not overly emotional. Kudos to Andrew Tomazos for writing this up in a fairly straightforward and logical way. I've got to give him credit for that. It's difficult to remain non-emotional when you yourself get banned from things. Having been banned from more organizations than I can count at this point, I can speak to that with a fair level of authority. So kudos, Andrew. I'm going to read a little bit this here. This is he labels this the first-hand account of the unidentified behavior question incident. To whom it may concern, I wanted to write this statement to set the record straight over recent events regarding my expulsion from the C++ Standards Committee over the paper title, The Undefined Behavior Question. I will try to give an honest, unbiased account of events as best I am able. And he really pulled that off quite well. He then goes on to talk, and we're going to skip over a bit of this at length, about his involvement. And he's been, how he's been working with the C++ working group in one form or another for about 12 years now, a little more than that. And he says, quote, at some point, I was made an official part of the C++ Foundation delegation during some kind of reorganization. I'm not super familiar with the procedural inner workings of the committee's bureaucracy, and to be honest, I've never really cared. I've always been a volunteer, as are most members, and was never paid to contribute before or after this. I donated my spare time for the purpose of giving something back to the programming language I primarily used professionally during my career. I've reviewed and written many C++ proposals over the years. In May of 2023, I reviewed an interesting C Standard Committee paper that came out of the Undefined Behavior Study Group called N3128, Taming the Daemons, Undefined Behavior and Partial Program Correctness. That paper would go on to be adopted into C23. And then he talks about all the papers he's writing, the papers he's reviewing around this, and you can go look through all the details of that as best you like. I'm gonna jump forward a little bit just because there's a lot here. In the lead up to the Poland meeting, the C++ Standards Working Group does have in-person meetings from time to time. In lead up to the Poland meeting, I also wrote a summary paper of the 3 papers mentioned in the previous paragraph. So of the various topics relating to undefined behaviors of C++. I felt the 3 papers were too complicated to present from a cold start, so I thought a primer paper could provide a good framework to get the main ideas loaded into people's minds. It posed the key question, the key language design question the 3 papers are tackling, which is, should undefined operations be allowed to affect observable operations that happen before them? I dubbed this question the undefined behavior question, and that was also the title of the paper. I posted this paper in the usual fashion to the C++ Standards Committee. At the meeting, and this is where it really gets into the nitty-gritty of when he got expulted. He got catapulted out of the working group. At the meeting, all 4 papers were routed to the safety group for a preliminary discussion. They discussed all 4 papers for several hours. As planned, I presented the undefined behavior question first as an introduction, and then we discussed the other 3 papers using the language from the primer paper as a context and a framework. I would say this went to plan. The group effectively voted to change C++'s answer to the undefined behavior question. Technically, this means we wanted to protect volatile access from subsequent undefined behaviors the same as I/O functions, which is what this proposes. So, the group also voted to forward my main paper to the next higher group, which is called Evolution. No vote was taken on the paper because it doesn't propose anything. That is, it poses and explains a question and so is purely informational. It doesn't propose an answer to the question. The other papers do. But certainly no issues were raised with either the papers or the title or its content. Okay, so at this point, this has been going through the committee. The paper he had written that got him the boot, there hasn't been an issue so far, right? Because it was a purely technical paper that posed a question and had the word question in it. So why would it be a problem? He continues. Quote, the next day we took the paper to the evolution group. During the presentation of that paper, the undefined behavior question, there was what seemed to me to be an odd comment. I think I heard someone say, quote, you should change the paper title. Upon hearing this, I didn't really understand. I thought it was a joke about undefined behavior being a dirty word or something. So I giggled a little, playing along with what I perceived as a joke, and continued on with the presentation. The other papers were presented as normal. The next day, I received an email from the head of the standard C++ Foundation delegation informing me that there had been formal complaints lodged with the International Committee for Information Technology Standards, the INCITS, about the interaction mentioned in the previous paragraph. Right? So when someone said that she should change the title and he giggled because he didn't really know what they were talking about, there have been formal complaints lodged. After some back and forth, I was informed by the delegation head that the reason for the complaint was, quote, the reason people are upset is because they feel the paper title refers to the Jewish question. with a link to the Wikipedia page of The Jewish Question. And of course, he's talking about the famous paper written by Karl Marx. He goes on to say, quote, "I was mortified. I felt physically sick. My first reaction was to immediately apologize profusely and to offer to change the paper title. I had no idea anyone would form such an association. I was informed of the technical procedure to change the paper title and started to work on that. But something happened," he continues. "As I was going to do that, I thought through options for drafting changes to the paper and realized what I was thinking about was altering the semantic structure of the paper itself. The paper poses an important question about undefined behavior, and so the title is correct, so to speak. I could change it to an undefined behavior question, or the undefined behavior query, or a question on undefined behavior, but it was changing the way I was thinking about the paper, and it's not clear if any of those changes would alter the association and be acceptable. Is it the concept of asking an important question that is creating the association? Throughout the paper, it refers to, quote, the question as an abbreviation for the undefined behavior question. So even if I change the title of the paper would still refer to even if you change the title, the paper would still refer to the question. And I thought to myself, would this satisfy those complaining, or do they want that changed too? Then I became a little angry," he says. "I suddenly got this feeling as if something wasn't right there. After thinking things through, I made a moral judgment that I hadn't done anything wrong." Just to stop for a second. The Lunduke Journal commentary. Andrew Tomazos, you have not done anything wrong. Your moral judgment on this is spot on. You have done nothing wrong. You didn't do anything anti-Semitic. You didn't do anything insulting. I can't think of a single Jewish man or woman or child who would see a technical paper titled "The Undefined Behavior Question" and think, "Oh, he's gonna hurt the Jews." That's crazy. Not one Jew on planet Earth thinks that. So you haven't done anything wrong. You haven't insulted anyone, actually. I'm going to continue now. Quote, "The right thing to do was to respectfully refuse the request and to not explain myself, as I don't want to live in a world where someone is not permitted to form and ask important questions without explaining themselves. I have a moral duty to act locally in a way that matches how I would want the world to be globally." Love it. Great statement, Andrew. He continues, "You see, I absolutely believe the question, what is the appropriate status of Jewish people, is reprehensible and immoral. That question presupposes it is moral to discriminate based on a person's ethnicity or religion. I find that kind of discrimination disgusting, as individuals should be judged based on the content of their individual character and their individual actions, not based on their group identities." I could high-five the heck out of you right now, Andrew. He continues, "That kind of discrimination in the extreme leads to apartheid and genocide, as history repeatedly teaches us. I'm not a religious man, but I believe and love thy neighbor, and do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I can think of no greater violation of those two rules than apartheid and genocide." Okay, that's fair. "However, I think the question," he continues, "what is the appropriate status of undefined behavior, is a perfectly valid and appropriate technical question, as program behavior is not people. So discriminating program behavior based on whether it is defined or undefined is morally acceptable. This is easily shown. Removing undefined behavior from a programming language is not an act of genocide." Removing undefined behavior from a programming language is not an act of genocide. Yes. I'm sorry, that's fantastic. That is just a great line. He continues, "So whether a question," I'm sorry I'm reading all this to you, everybody, but this is worth noting because this is actually from the source, and we get this out there, and there's no more people second guessing and wondering anymore. We just know the actual details of what happens, because I've heard no details from any individuals at all that have called into question anything that he's saying here. He says, So whether a question about the status of something is moral or immoral depends entirely on what the subject of the discrimination is. If the subject is an ethnic or religious group of people, that is immoral. If the subject is a class of operations in a programming language, then that is fine. We should not ban asking all important questions about the status of things because such questions have been inappropriately posed in the past about ethnic or religious groups of people. Yes, correct. He wrote a short paper about it. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. He was then informed of the delegation that they fully understand that principles are important. And this is a quote from the delegation, right? They fully understand that principles are important, but in this case, the principles in question also affect the foundation, the C++ Standard Foundation. If there is no way of mending the situation, we will have to politely excuse ourselves from being drawn into the discussion by rescinding the invitation to be our alternate. At the moment, we are at a place where the title is causing offense and objections from multiple individuals, and that is not acceptable for us. End quote. He goes on to say, I urged the head of the delegation to reconsider their ultimatum, but they took it as me refusing to change the paper title and said, quote, I'm afraid the standard C++ Foundation is no longer able to sponsor your Working Group 21 membership, end quote. And I was expelled from the various Working Group 21 services and uninvited from the committee meetings. I went public with this story because I felt it is a story of public interest. In the aftermath of that, there have been a lot of false rumors circulating about what happened. The other side of this story, the standard C++ Foundation, have remained tight-lipped, simply claiming the content of the complaints are confidential, and so they can't talk about what happened. That is absolutely true. And the ISO committee has remained tight-lipped. The Working Group 21 hasn't said anything. And like I showed you, they even protected their C++ and their C++ standard X account. They locked it. So if you go to x.com and look for ISO CPP, they've just locked it down because they don't want anyone talking about it. This has created a vacuum where the idiotic rumors have spread. No doubt. People have suggested that the real issue was the quality of my work or long-term behavioral conduct problems, or even more ridiculous, yet it has something to do with ChatGPT. I've been called a grifter, a troll, a swine of a man, that my work is a denial of service attack on the committee, that I have been trying to use ChatGPT to gain power, whatever that means, and that all this was just, quote, the last straw, end quote, and a trumped-up excuse to get rid of me. Frankly, that's a load of rubbish. This is the first time a formal complaint has been issued about my conduct and forwarded to me. I strongly believe such a complaint would have been issued against anyone posting a paper with the title The Undefined Behavior Question, regardless of the author or the paper's content. Some people have been claiming that if they were in my shoes, they would have just given in to the request and changed the paper title. Like, what's the big deal? To those people, I say, you weren't in my shoes, so you don't know what I would have done. There have been a couple of comments from others. I want to read one of them here because one here is from Bjorn Stroustrup, the creator of C++. Bjorn Stroustrup commented privately to Tomazos. He said, quote, unfortunately, I have not gotten around to reading that paper. I don't see why anyone would be offended by that title, nor do I see why you would not change it if someone did take offense. I think that we have better things to do with our time than to fight over something like this. Herb Sutter, who was the creator of that working group, of the C++ standard working group, said privately to me, quote, we've been glad to have you participating in Working Group 21 as a free guest for many years. Your current sponsoring member isn't going to continue to be responsible for your participation, and this is important. Then you're welcome to rejoin Working Group 21 via a different member. So what they're saying is that it's really not necessarily just the ISO organization working group, but the C++ Standards Foundation that is saying they don't want any part of this, right? They don't want Andrew Tomazos as a member if he uses the word question, right? That's what they're saying, which is bizarre and peculiar. So in theory, he could rejoin the working group if another company or organization paid for him to do so, right? Andrew Tomazos went on to say, well, thank you for having me as a free guest for all these years and not asking me to pay for the privilege of donating my spare time to improve the C++ programming language. You can just feel the feelings that he's got based on those words. I won't be applying to rejoin Working Group 21, though, through a different member, as I've decided to wash my hands of the C++ Standards Committee. I feel unfairly treated over this incident, and so I don't want to reward that. And besides, my motivation to contribute was always hanging by a thread anyway, given how frustrating the standardization process is to begin with. Holy heavens. So there you have it. I mean, that's the reality of the situation as it stands right now. Now, I've been speaking with two individuals inside Working Group 21, the C++ working group, and they've been providing me with their personal viewpoints. And I'm pulling those details together right now because both of these individuals feel very passionately about C++, and they want to see the working group succeed. So they're being very careful about what information they leak out to me, because these individuals feel that sunlight is the best disinfectant. Clearly, Andrew Tomazos feels the same way, but they also want to make sure that anything they present isn't too ultimately damaging to the working group. And I respect that. And so I'm going to present some additional information to everybody in the days ahead as all of that gets pulled together. I hope that the statement from Andrew and some of the additional comments that'll come out in the coming days will kind of put to rest a lot of the speculation that's happening and a lot of the false narratives that have been raised around why Andrew was banned. And now here's why some of that is a little fascinating to me. So why Andrew was kicked out was very obvious from day one when I reported on this initially. It was very clear what had happened. There was a very specific event, and that a specific event was bizarre and weird, but it was very straightforward and well-defined. There clearly is more to the story, but the additional parts of the story were clearly not Andrew Tomazos uses ChatGPT to gain power, or he's engaging in a denial of service attack on the standards body, or something bizarre. Like, that didn't make any sense at all. So there are individuals out there pushing those sorts of narratives, which clearly seem designed to distract away from the core actual story, the narrative, the story that Andrew Tomazos outlines here in his first-hand account of the incident. Why are those individuals so vehemently ardent that they need to get out there and attack Andrew Tomazos, to tear him down, to belittle him, to paint him as some sort of a vile evildoer intent on bringing things down? And why is that? It's peculiar. Judging from the information that you can glean on Andrew Tomazos, which is quite a bit, because he's written a number of papers around C++. He's worked with a large number of individuals who you can get some firsthand accounts of. Those attacks on him don't make any sense. They don't add up. So who are these individuals? And you start looking into the attacks on him, and they're all coming from anonymous accounts, right? Social media and forum accounts of people who are not using their real name, who more often than not have a cartoon avatar of a anthropomorphic animal in anime style as their avatar really regularly. And some of the individuals also post regularly about Rust programming language topics and the like. So is there some sort of almost religious anti-C++ component to this? I don't know. Is there some groups that are worried that if Andrew's story is told, it's going to paint the working group in a negative light? That might be possible. But just the same, it does tell you that all the people who have been out there yelling about how this guy wasn't banned for the use of the word question, he was banned for a million other reasons, those people were either misinformed or lying. That much we have pretty readily verified at this point. Again, though, there's more information that will be coming to light on this. I have a lot of information to sift through, emails and just firsthand accounts of inner workings of the working group to understand really what's going on here. And the point of me publishing these in the coming days ahead, I want to make it very clear, is not a hit piece on the working group. I have no interest in seeing C++ crash and burn. C++ is one of my favorite programming languages. I mean, I like C better, but C++ is great. I've spent so many years of my life just nose deep in C++. I love C++. It's fantastic. I have no interest in seeing the working group anything but succeed. However, I have a very strong feeling that sunlight is always the best disinfectant, right? And if there are issues that are adversely impacting the standard of C++, let's get those out there. Let's shine some sunshine on those issues and let's talk about them. And that's what I intend to do going forward. Thank you to all the Lunduke Journal subscribers that help make this work possible. Lunduke.com for all the linking and the URLs and the whatnots that you can get over there. Podcasts and videos and articles. It's all there. It's great. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, nerds and nerdettes across this vast, glorious inner tube of ours, I do declare, end broadcast.